Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year to the town of Hingham and those who are watching. Tonight is the Selectmen's meeting for Thursday, January 9th. Our agenda this evening is to have a public hearing from National Grid on a gas main installation, a public hearing from Local Seafoods on a change of manager. We'll have a traffic committee recommendation for parking restrictions near the Hingham High School. We'll listen to the Massport update on the activities for the committee that governs noise and other issues surrounding Logan Airport and its impact on Hingham. We will have a report on the false naming committee, which is an issue many of you will recall. For the only known member of the town of Hingham, and he was an employee of the town of Hingham, who received the Medal of Honor in the Spanish-American War. And then we'll start a discussion that will put you all to sleep dealing with the budgets, and hopefully we'll make it enlightening as we go through that. But before we begin any of this, Bob, if you could be so kind as to move the camera to the back of the room. We're very honored to have this evening members of Troop 1 from the Boy Scouts of America here in Hingham. They are in the process of earning a merit badge that deals with well, that is the first step, dealing with community and dealing with citizenship. So I'd like to invite them up to the microphone. Come on up. There's no dogs. It's not wired here. And I'd like, so the folks at home know who you are for being so dedicated to the service you provide. If you'd come to the microphone and just introduce yourself by name. Thank you.
I'm Ivan France.
Thank you, Ivan.
Leland France.
Leland France.
Benning Wentworth.
Benning.
Trish Curran.
Trish.
Paul Rocket.
Paul.
Luke Chipman.
Luke.
Nicholas Iaria.
Bobby Sullivan.
Bob Sullivan. The last person who introduced himself is an example of Hingham citizenship. Bobby served, and 6 years ago when I ran for office, he was kind of my deputy campaign manager. His job was to plot on a map of Hingham where all our signs were. So he learned how voting happens, and that's part of your exercise, I understand. Understand citizenship and how not only just by voting, which is not only a right but an obligation for many of us, but Hingham is blessed to have 400 volunteers to serve and help us accommodate and address the issues that the town has to deal with to function. And by your being here tonight, that's an excellent opportunity to demonstrate that dedication that citizens at a young age start to bring to the town so that we survive. We've been doing this since 1635. I have only been here since 1636, so it's not a
joke, fellas.
No, it's true. I thought. Thanks. So I'd like to introduce you to my colleague Irma Lauder and Paul Healy.
Hi, guys.
Yeah. And so I hope tonight you find it interesting. This is a series of meetings that we have during the course of a year. 52 weeks is the course of a year. We meet about 45 to 50 times, depending on the issues. And we go through it very deliberately, understanding, listening to people making propositions or listening to people explain problems that they're dealing with. And our purpose is to resolve them. And if we can't, we make recommendations to others to help us to solve those problems. And then we serve as the executive. We're like the mayor for other towns. We're unique in New England because we have a selectman, a board that governs these issues. When we decide something, we then pass it on to the representatives of town meeting, the advisory committee. And I would recommend that you spend some time with them in your learning effort. And then the advisory committee then goes on to make recommendations to town meeting, the ultimate authority in Hingham, and that meets at the end of April. So that's a simple, abridged version of everything you're going to learn tonight, and I hope you find this enjoyable. And if at certain times I'll ask for questions, please feel free to ask any that you'd like. I don't know if my colleagues have any additional comments they'd like to ask. So, Paul.
No, I think you've said it well. Stay with it, guys. Boy Scouts is a great experience. I recently had the pleasure of going to an Eagle ceremony, and I thought it was quite impressive. I was in the Boy Scouts as a kid, but I never made it that far. So, okay, good. Good luck.
A couple things. Congratulations to you all earning citizenship in the community, and I expect to see every one of you back here earning your Eagle and getting your Eagle. So that's an expectation. Also, since we've got them all up here and one of our troop leaders, Troop 1 would love your Christmas tree. If your Christmas tree is still at home, and yes, that's the little skinny thing that all the needles are on the floor, they will be picking up trees on Saturday the 11th. If you want, I was going to do this at the end for Selectmen's reports, but I'd rather have it right now. If you're interested, there is something up on the Hingham website, but let me give you the phone number. It's 781-749-2963, and they'll be picking the trees up between 8 and 4, but if you'll call that number, they'll give you all the rest of the details. So that is one way these young men earn money, but I consider it a service project, 'cause then we don't have to take it to the dump and it doesn't sit in the backyard forever and ever.
Good point.
So congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you. And I can tell you, you picked mine up on time. So that's the best endorsement I can give the folks at home. So have a seat and welcome to the meeting. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing. Before I start that, I stand corrected. I'd like that there are some minutes before us that I'd like to delay until our next agenda, if that's agreeable to my peers.
That's fine.
Okay. The first item officially on the agenda is a public hearing, which is a request from National Grid to install and maintain 1,300 feet of gas main. So could I invite National Grid and the representative, Dennis Reagan, and our highway superintendent and street manager, Harry Sylvester. Dennis, if you would.
My name is Dennis Reagan, and I'm the permit representative for National Grid. And tonight, National Grid hereby respectfully requests your consent to install and maintain approximately 1,300 feet, more or less, of 6-inch gas main in Fresh River Ave, Hingham. From the existing 6-inch gas main near house number 50, easterly to the proposed 6-inch gas main in Fort Hill Street, and approximately 1,875 feet, more or less, of 6-inch gas main in Fort Hill Street from the proposed 6-inch gas main in Fresh River Ave, easterly to house number 117, and approximately 1,600 feet, more or less, of 6-inch gas main in Fort Hill Street from the existing 6-inch gas main at New Bridge Street, easterly to the existing 6-inch gas main at House 39, all of which to replace and abandon the existing 6-inch gas mains in Fresh River Ave and Fort Hill Street.
Thank you. Emma, any questions?
Wow. This is a pretty big project. Are you planning to do it now?
I'm planning to do it when we get the okay from
Harry.
Mr. Sylvester.
Yes, the plan is to try to get it in during the winter months, so the road will be ready to be paved during the construction season.
This is a very busy area, and the weather has not exactly been cooperative.
But we will make sure when we schedule the work that we will be looking at 3-day windows of weather. It's not really a normal way of doing things, but in order to get that road, I mean, if it was on the construction schedule last year, National Grid, to give you a little history, wasn't able to fit it in their budget. If you've driven over Fort Hill Street recently, you'll see it starting to unravel. We're probably a year too late. So in order to get that road in good shape to pave this year, so we won't have any more deterioration out there, I mean, it's pretty important to get it in now. We feel pretty confident that we can get it in without a lot of inconvenience to the commuters or the public. We did this on Main Street down Petrie Hill a few years ago without any major inconvenience. So I think we could hopefully the snow season is behind us, but
Sure.
we'll take it as it comes, and it'll be paved every night up to grade, during the installation.
So you need a 3-day window to do all of this?
No. We look at the weather forecast in 3-day windows to know where we're going to stop, start, and, secure the trenches for any inclement weather. This project will probably take the better part of 5 or 6 weeks to install. If you notice in the letter, it is 100 years old, and there have been a number of leaks along that piece of main, so it's, it's good to get it replaced before we consider paving it.
Okay. Go ahead. I'll maybe some follow-up, but they answered the main questions I had.
Paul?
Thank you. Gentlemen, are you going to be using steel plates with this job?
As needed.
As needed.
If some storm was going to come up that was going to be very disruptive, Harry would instruct us to backfill the hole and leave the job where it is so the plates wouldn't be in the way of any of your plows. But normally, we are able to install anywhere from 80 to 160 feet a day, sometimes even more, and it'd be probably one plate, and maybe one plate at the beginning of the job where they dug the first tie-in hole.
Okay. And were you going to use some kind of compactor?
What normally they do is they berm, they berm the plates. So they'll bring asphalt up over to smooth the edges so it's less disruptive to go over.
Okay. In the spring, is this going to be like a partial reconstruction of the roadway?
Normally, it's given some time before we do the final restoration.
What we have planned is what they'll do is they'll compact the trench this winter. They'll fill it with, they'll match existing depth of pavement, or at least a minimum of 4 inches with binder to grade. And then once the whole trench was satisfied that we'll have compaction test, and if it's compacted properly, then we'll come in and mill the whole entire trench back about 6 inches from each edge of the trench, and they'll repave it flush to grade, and then we'll come in and pave it curb to curb with a double course of micro seal over that for a wearing surface.
Is there any kind of particularized fill that you use in the winter season as opposed to if you did this in the spring?
Well, the fill has to be fluid. No frozen material will be backfilled, and the stone size will be no greater than 3 inches.
Somebody will be on site from the highway?
Yeah, I'll be there from time to time to inspect the job as it's being carried out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I noticed on the list of abutters, you put everyone on Fort Hill Street.
This is the list that's supplied to me.
Okay. So I don't know whether to recuse myself from this vote because I don't live on Fort Hill Street, but every morning at breakfast I look at it. And I wasn't on the list. So obviously I'll be interested in how I can maneuver out my driveway to get through this. So the amount of time you'll need to do this will be how long?
Well,
all things going as planned.
About 6 weeks is what Mr. Sylvester said that he thinks that the project will go. But normally, they'll only be in front of an individual's home on one particular day. That's when we have the plates if the hole is open, so people have easy access to get in and out of their driveways, along with working with the detail offices.
Okay. How many houses do you think, or estimate?
Well, it depends on the distance, but like I say, anywhere from maybe 200, 225 feet a day or something like that, but that'll be opened and backfilled the same day.
Okay, so that's ambitious. Okay, very good. Thank you.
Two details.
Whatever is decided, that's all done at when we apply for the street opening permit and the pre-construction conference with Mr. Sylvester, and all that stuff is decided.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's all right. Harry, do you have any concern with the kind of weather that we've been having where we have snow and ice followed by, supposedly, we're going to have a good, healthy rainstorm? That if so much is being dug up, even though it's being covered and compacted, that we're going to end up with how shall I say this, the best potholes in the town?
We have plenty of potholes in town.
Well, that's why
and
I'm saying the best.
And I'm always concerned about the weather, but in regards to this project, I don't have any concerns or reservation whatsoever with the weather affecting this project. If we know that there's a period of inclement weather coming in, we'll shut the job down, pave it up to grade. They compact it, on a regular basis during the day. I just don't foresee any problems with the trench at all, causing an inconvenience for anybody. If there is any problems, I mean, the contractor will be there immediately to repair it. Probably quicker than we can get to most of the potholes that we have in town, but we're giving it our best effort also.
Okay, I'm good.
The citizens that will be disrupted in this, how many people have applied for service? Is that the reason why you're doing this?
We're relaying this main because it doesn't have any protection on it. When it was installed, there was no protection on the steel pipe, so there's issues with the age of the pipe and the condition of it because it's been in this ground so long. We will reconnect or relay every service to every existing customer. If new people want services, I can direct them to contact marketing and sales.
All right, so this is for safety purposes?
Yes, and just maintenance in general, yes.
Okay, very good.
There's a number of leaks, it's history of a leaking pipe. I mean, when you have a gas main that's 100 years old and there's no protection for the steel pipe, I mean, it corrodes over time, and 100 years old is probably, they've gotten their use out of it, and it's time to replace it.
Okay. Any questions from the public? There being none, I'd entertain a motion to vote on this. Irma?
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the request of National Grid to install and maintain approximately 1,300 feet of 6-inch gas main in Fresh River Ave from the existing 6-inch gas main near house number 50, easterly to the proposed 6-inch gas main in Fort Hill Street, and approximately 1,875 feet of 6-inch gas main in Fort Hill Street from the proposed 6-inch gas main in Fresh River Ave, easterly to house number 117, and approximately 1,600 feet of 6-inch gas main in Fort Hill Street from the existing 6-inch gas main at New Bridge Street, easterly to the existing 6-inch gas main at house number 39, all of which to replace and abandon the existing 6-inch steel gas mains in Fresh River Ave and Fort Hill Street. This approval is subject to the stipulation of the Department of Public Works, including letter dated December 12th, 2013.
Second.
Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you,
very
Dennis.
much.
Thank you.
Keep it quiet early, will you, Dennis? Keep it quiet early in the morning. I'd appreciate it.
Harry will decide the starting time.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a request from Legal Seafoods on a change of manager. Who is here to represent them? Please come up. Thank you. If you'd be so kind to introduce yourselves to the public.
Yes. My name is Donna Cruz, and I work at Legal Seafoods as a paralegal for the General Counsel.
And I'm James Mcluhan. I'm the Assistant General Manager of Legal Sea Bar in Derby Street.
Okay. And your request this evening?
Yes, we are petitioning for a change of manager for the local restaurant from Stephen Urance to James Mcluhan.
Okay. This is rather a straightforward issue for us. Generally, it does happen.
This is very quick,
Yeah.
actually.
It is.
It's a beautiful restaurant. It's very good food, too.
Oh, well, I can't say thank you. I'm not the chef, but
Oh, you can take credit for it.
well, I will then. Food's fantastic. Sometimes a little too good.
Have you gone through all the tips training and all the training?
Absolutely. In fact, I actually just recertified on the 5th of December of 2013 as well.
Now, were you at another legal restaurant?
Previously, I was at Park Square, the Legal Seafoods at Park Square, downtown, and then Chestnut Hill prior to as well.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Paul?
I have no questions.
Okay. Very good. Okay, I have no questions. This is something that I know happens from time to time. And we welcome you, and we welcome the service that you provide to the citizens of Hingham. And we know you help fund some of our efforts, so we appreciate that as well. That being said, are there any questions from the public? There being none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the request of Legal Seafoods LLC, DBA Legal Sea Bar, for a change of manager from Stephen J. Urance to James Mcluhan.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have, the next item on the agenda is recommendations from the Traffic Committee concerning parking restrictions near Hingham High School. If you be so kind to introduce yourselves to the public.
Certainly. Good evening. My name is Stephen Dirth. I'm a sergeant with the Hingham Police. I'm in charge of the traffic division. I represent Chief Perino on the traffic committee.
Harry Sylvester, project engineer, assistant project engineer, 30-year member of the traffic committee, and I happen to be the one that made the motion.
Okay. Steve, if you'd be so kind as to advise us as to what you're thinking.
Certainly. So the traffic committee held a public meeting on November 20th, 2013 to discuss complaints that we received regarding parking issues around the high school, whether those, to try to address those, if we can update the regulations and possibly create some more no parking areas in there to try to keep the high school traffic on the property of the high school. Since the expansion of the field, the satellite lot on Union Street, that high school has more than enough room to accommodate all the traffic from the school, faculty, visitors, and things like that during the day. So we received some complaints from residents in that area, so we held that meeting. One resident did show up, and traffic committee, which is made up of representatives from various DPW, planning board, the police department, the fire department, citizens at large that are appointed by the selectmen. So we held that public meeting, try to figure out what ways we can do to try to accommodate the residents and keep that area a little bit more open and keep the traffic on the high school property itself, which is plenty of room. So the motions were made to make a recommendation. As you know, the traffic committee makes recommendations to the selectmen. We don't actually make any rules. We make recommendations based on our committee. And so what we did is we came up with motion was made, it was discussed, and it was unanimous by the traffic committee members to recommend some changes in that area, particularly on Pleasant Street and Middle Street around the high school. Specifically, do you want me to list?
Yes, would you?
Certainly.
That would be kind. Thank you.
So Pleasant Street on the north side, which would be, the north side is the side opposite of the high school on Pleasant Street. So that north side is that side of the road there, opposite from the high school. From there, we recommended no parking from the Pond Street intersection up past Middle Street intersection to School Street. And to make that no parking from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. That was one of the recommendations. This is all one recommendation, that one piece of it. The second part of that recommendation, and there were three parts. The second part was on Middle Street, on the east side, which is the side, if you're coming up Middle from the high school, the east side would be on the right. That's the even number side. To make Middle Street on that east side from number 32 up to the intersection of Pleasant Street, no parking. Again, the same time, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Monday through Friday. And the third part of that recommendation was on Middle Street again, on the west side, which is the odd number side, from number 29 up to the Pleasant Street intersection. Again, no parking Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. Part of that, the majority of the complaints we received were on the Pleasant Street side. However, the committee looked at the whole area, and I think what we thought is if we suggested we make Pleasant Street no parking, you're going to just move the spaces over, move the problem over onto Middle Street. So because of that, we decided to adopt part of our recommendation, if you're wondering where we got those numbers from, as far as number 32 and 29 Middle Street. They came from, in 1999, this is just to give you the history of where we came from. 1999, during the reconstruction of the high school, or the high school itself, the Board of Selectmen made a temporary amendment to the traffic rules and regulations, and that was to adopt just what we talked about, from those numbers up to Pleasant Street. And that was simply during the construction to avoid having everybody not park. Parking was limited, and to keep them out in the neighborhood and to keep those roadways open there on the high school. So that was only in effect. The regulations, per the town rules and regulations, were only in effect from 1999 up until the completion of the high school project. So once that was done, those regulations were not in effect anymore, and the signs were removed. And again, those were from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. and Monday to Friday. So that's where we kind of followed the same issues, the same restrictions as a recommendation that they dealt with before, because that seemed to work back in 1999. And of course, the layout of that neighborhood hasn't changed. There's still houses in the same places, and there's no additions on the street there as far as expansions. On the recommendation, we did have Pleasant Street, I didn't mention this, both sides, the north and south side. The north side, again, is across from the high school. South side is the side of the high school. Already that part there is primarily posted no parking already, so that's more or less just overlapping what's already in place. So that's some of the recommendation.
Okay. Before we proceed, and I want to have this hearing because, one, I wanted to, and with the concurrence of my peers, announce to the public what the Traffic Committee was recommending and the neighborhood that was involved in these new parking restrictions, and two, to give those people so notified an opportunity to voice an opinion on this issue. So it will not be my recommendation that we vote this tonight, but that we give an opportunity for the citizens who are affected by these no parking restrictions an opportunity to weigh in on the impact. But I wanted the hearing to proceed, so if there are any questions of any of us up here or the public, that we could identify those. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Mr. Healy, if I may.
I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Irma?
Thank you, Sergeant Durth. I have been up and down these streets during the day when it was very difficult to get up and down them because of the cars and pickup trucks and such on both sides. And I would have a concern about our public safety vehicles, especially the fire and the ambulances. So I think this is really good. If someone has, and Bruce, I'll toss this back to you, if someone has comments, because I'd be very interested in comments from the people that live on these streets, such that if someone's having a small gathering during the middle of the day, where would the cars park? If they had 5 or 6 people over, how would you handle the traffic? But I would be very interested in hearing the comments from the people that live along those 2 streets. Where should they send the comments, Bruce?
They should to the police chief. The comment should come to the police chief, since he's the one who's asked me to give him an opportunity to review the impact of this.
And will we get to see all of them, just maybe summarized?
I'm sure Mike would be happy to do that, if there are any. I think when we introduce a parking restriction of this nature, we want to be sure that people understand the impact. And while the assumption is that there will be many people not directly impacted by it, because most of the people have driveways during this period where they could accommodate people, however, you want to be sure that you understand every implication. So I always like to let this happen, is let people comment and then direct their comments directly to the police chief, since he's Sergeant Durth's supervisor. Do this. I understand why we want to do this. I think it has a lot of merit. But you're right, Irma, it's the impact on the neighborhood, and we want to make sure they have an opportunity to comment, since this may have been the first time that they've heard this. Okay. So are there any comments from the audience? All right, my intent would be to reschedule this vote for the 23rd of January, if that meets with your agreement.
If there's people over here from the neighborhood?
Yeah, I just asked that. I just asked that. Come. I just asked that. Come on up to the microphone.
I think we have a lot of the neighbors here. My issue.
Tell us who you are and where you live.
My name is Ellen Mark, and I live on Pleasant Street.
What's your address?
47 Pleasant.
Thank you.
Sometimes I find it very hard to back out of my driveway during the day because the cars are parking on the street. So backing out of my driveway is sometimes difficult. The school buses sometimes have a tough time picking the kids up because there's congestion, people parking on the street. I mean, there's nothing more that I can say that you don't already know. There's congestion, and I feel that we have a much bigger parking lot now at the high school, and I don't see why there should be parking on the street. We, taxpayers, we built this parking lot at the high school, doubled it in size, and now they're parking on our street. So I feel like...
Okay, that's good. Okay, no, very good. Your
But I
points...
feel like we're all here, so I don't know why we want to delay it.
Not everybody's here.
Yeah.
Not everybody. No, I can tell you I talked to some people on Middle Street who were unaware of this today. So I think it's only fair that there may be many, the people I talked to are somewhat in agreement with you, but in fairness to those who are not aware of this, when we're making...
I was unaware that you were going to be going up Middle Street. That I wasn't aware of, so I...
That's exactly why, that's why we do this way. We understand your desire.
Chairman?
Yes.
I just want to add that even if it was voted on tonight, that the town would restrict those areas of the parking, it's probably going to be next to impossible to install those signs with the frost in the ground. So a delay probably wouldn't hurt anything because we couldn't post it, we couldn't enforce it until it's posted. So we're probably looking to at least middle of February before it could get posted legally and being able to enforce.
Okay. So it means it doesn't defrost on Middle Street, but it does on Fort Hill Street? Is that what you're telling me? I'm just making that connection.
We're hoping the ground under Fort Hill Street's not frozen, it's under pavement.
That was good.
And it's gravel.
That was good.
We're putting the signs in the landscape shoulder of the road, that would be, I think it'll be frozen.
Okay. All right, Harry. That's a free one. That's a free one.
Hi.
Yes, ma'am. Good.
Karen Fanning, 44 Pleasant Street. I don't have anything to add, although there are several people here, and I think
Yes.
I can speak on their behalf to say that we're all in support, at least the ones who are here today, in support of the parking restrictions.
Okay. That's good to hear. Thank you. Thank you for that. No, as I said, I had talked to a number of people on Pleasant Street, and I know they're anxious to see this through, but in the interest of fairness, I want to make sure that others have an opportunity. Are there any other comments? Yes.
Could I just add, Mr. Chairman, that if these parking regulations are approved or changed, they would apply to everybody? In other words, you're not exempt. No parking from 7 to 2 is regardless of whether you live there or not. That's the only drawback about making restrictions in parking in neighborhoods. That applies to everybody. Even if you lived there, you still couldn't park in front of your house subject to a ticket. So just so we're all aware of that too.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
The recommendation is Monday through Friday, 7 to 2.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, just a brief question. Chris Ward, 50 Pleasant Street. Addressing what Irma had to say about gatherings, and I know that on Middle Street that's especially probably critical because they don't have as much driveway space. Would you guys consider a 2-hour parking over that period? I mean, the concern really is, I don't know if all my neighbors agree with this, is that if high school students start parking along there, they set a precedent, and a 2-hour parking would accomplish probably the same goal. Just as a thought.
My understanding, if I may, I talked to the superintendent had made that recommendation to the police, and the deputy chief is here. That puts it doesn't solve the problem, number one, because the students are there more than 2 hours if it is the students that are causing the issue. And secondly, that puts a burden on the police department, every 2 hours. This way, they have more flexibility in the enforcement. But that's a good comment, and I'll make sure that's passed along.
If I could just add, the other part of that too is that if part of the reason for these parking regulations that we're making a recommendation is for safety and visibility, then leaving a car there for an hour and 59 minutes is still going to create that safety problem. So that may not be, just from our point of view, as a police point of view, a solution.
Yeah, and to the point Irma made earlier, I mean, there is a safety issue in terms of when the cars are backed up, particularly in the late afternoon, the ability of safety vehicles, fire engines, et cetera, to get through there is an issue. Are there any other comments on this? Okay, so I'll ask Betty if you'd be so kind to reschedule this for January 23rd for a vote, and that if you would put your comments into the Chief of Police, Mike Perino, and you're supporting your opinion on this. Okay, I thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is an update from our representative to the Massport hearing, Declan Boland. Declan, would you be so kind to come on up? Hello. Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, sir.
So I was just going to update on the activities of the Logan Airport Noise Committee. I'm Declan Boland of 338 Main Street. I was appointed by the Selectmen, I think it was 2005, to represent the town on this committee. This committee has been active in some format for about 30 years, and the particular goal is to minimise noise across the metropolitan area created by particularly Logan, but actually does apply to other airports like Bedford and out as far as Worcester. So the scope, though, of the committee was very much around noise mitigation. The current compilation of the group is about 40 different communities. So it's quite an unwieldy group of people. I'm also part of the leadership team, and we actually moved very effectively in the year. So I provided a cover memo, which I'll just go through the highlights, and I was going to just take a couple of minutes to do that and then go to questions as a result of that.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, we're now into phase 3 of this. Phase 1 and 2 were very much, the results are very positive for Hingham. As you may or may not know, there's quite a lot of flights that actually travel over Hingham at various different heights. At actually, on average, it's about 370 flights a day. You don't see many of them, they're too high. But a lot of them actually were causing noise. And during phases 1 and 2, we redirected a lot of the flight operations to go further east. So in turn, going back over Hingham, they were flying at about 14,000 feet, which actually you very seldom hear that noise. So the noise we're really hearing from airplanes these days is actually coming from planes landing in Hingham, which I'll come to in a minute. Phase 3 is that we just entered it, and it's essentially what we're trying to do is create a runway end-use program. So what this means is that if you can imagine the end of a runway at Logan, as the planes depart, what we're trying to do is actually come up a fair way of distributing the aircraft so that each community gets a fair amount of load relative to where they're located, the amount of population that's there, whether they're on close to the shore, etc. It's quite a complicated thing to do, but effectively is that we've had quite a number of meetings with the FAA and with Massport and the air traffic controllers in order to try and figure this thing out. In tandem to all of that, the committee itself, we're alive until the end of phase 3, effectively. So the role for Hingham involved in this actually will change, and in fact I sent a letter to the Selectmen to be appointed to this change. So what's going to happen is that this committee will stay in force for that, or may go into phase 4. Separately, we went to the Speaker DeLeo and asked for funding in order for we to get our own organisation, administration, consultants in order to help through this fairness programme of the Runway End Use Committee. And out of that, in the transportation bill that was signed by Governor Deval Patrick, we got some funding which would be administered through Massport. So the good news is in all of this is actually said our relationship with Massport and with the FAA has improved significantly, where it was very contentious in the past. Now it's a spirit of collaboration. We've got a memo of understanding from Massport in order to create this use program, and in turn then we're waiting for one from the FAA, which have agreed both verbally and then through a memo that actually they are going to create this. This will actually be the first time it's been done in the United States to get this memo from the FAA. As you can understand, the FAA they're a large organisation. They suffered from quite a lot of problems this year due to the sequester, delays and everything like that, so we're finally getting to the end of that. So what will happen, as I went through, in the memo that I outlined it. One is that the areas that actually are of concern, less to us, are things like ground noise, but in Winthrop that's a big problem. Low-flying aircraft noise is another issue. We experience it actually, which is coming in over World's End, in that particular area of town. We're experiencing that. We're experiencing regional jet noise as a result of the new runway that they opened in parallel to the northwest. And then finally is that part of our brief is about air pollution. Now, up until now, we haven't addressed that. There is a report coming out in a matter of months, which will actually have a significant impact on the view of air pollution, particularly surrounding Logan. So, with that, we've got some funding that's there, and in the background to all of this, there's a thing called NextGen, which essentially is that a significant investment by the federal government in order to organise airplanes using sort of GPS devices so that they actually can concentrate the air traffic flow and increase the efficiency across North America. So the milestones we've got is, as we talked about, getting the funding, the new organisation, the Massport Advisory Group, which will be appointed by either the governor or else by the mayor of Boston, which will actually, and Massport itself, which Hingham has a seat on that committee. There will also, this effort in terms of getting the memos of understanding with the FAA and Massport, and then the work that needs to be done in order to create this new runway use program. The areas of concern, particularly for Hingham, are actually is that one is to get this program done. Why that's important for us is that the areas that are causing disruption are got to do with night flights coming in for us. Secondly is that to keep pressure on the FAA in order to implement what they call a continuous descent. Basically, its plane comes in like that rather than step down, which is causing all this whining of those aircraft as we hear them. Thirdly is that for arrivals or for it's called an ILS or a nav arrival. It's a technical term for how they navigate with airplanes coming in and that. And then finally is that to increase over the water routing of all of these aircraft so that we don't feel that impact. One area that is a concern is that what we've discovered this year was that we can have the best laid plans, but at the end of the day, it comes down to an air traffic controller and a pilot and how they actually fly the route. So what we're trying to do is make sure as part of this plan is actually said that is documented and enforced as a procedure so that both sides of the party knows that this can be enforced, monitored, and also that reported so that we can actually have improvement as we go forward. And finally, I did have a volunteer to back me up as a delegate, Ron Vickers, who lives over. He's here tonight, and he's volunteered to help me going forward. And I just wanted to ask you to give us approval for that. I'm not sure if you need to do it formally or not, but I have him actually lined up to help me out.
You're drafted, I suspect. Okay. Any objections?
Not at all. Thank you for volunteering.
Declan, I assume there will be some form of reporting process that will tell us how they're doing relative to these proposals. Is that a formal publication?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. How frequently?
Well, that's just to be determined, and it is a good question. On the noise complaints, which I actually didn't talk about, in the town report that I produced in 2013, it was February 2013, is that we'd seen a decrease in the number of complaints from Hingham. What's interesting is that number has ballooned actually in 2013, and I don't know why. I just saw the report the other day, but the point being is actually said whether it's just be more conscious of it. The number of operations has increased significantly. The type of operations has increased significantly, or maybe it's actually a group in a small area of town, which is perhaps why Ron is actually so keen to be involved. That could be it as well. All that being said, that's a metric that actually is very public. Going forward, that's one of the requirements that we wanted, and being frustrated by the authorities in not making a lot of this information transparent. They do have the responsibility to do that. So it's part of this runway use program that actually they will be required to do it.
Irma?
Declan, thank you for doing this. You've done this so well and just very quietly. And I think there's been a decrease. Because we seem to be on a path for it's like the 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. UPS or one of the, because I tracked it down once, and it's one of the big boxes coming in for delivery of packages and goods. And that seems to have abated somewhat. So I thank you very much, not completely, but somewhat.
Yeah, I think we'll get there. There is a plan to push those out to over the water. They'll come in over Marshfield, go out over the water and come around. And unfortunately that they're given a free rein at the moment. The other part of it is to my knowledge, it's only about 6 operations that actually causes that problem. There's 3 freighters and 3 JetBlues, you know. So we have a discussion going, we think, with JetBlue in order to help us out here.
Yeah, what can we do to help you and Mr. Vickers?
I think to continue with your support. I think the town and the Selectmen, I mean, what probably is not publicised is actually the town put up money on this thing. It was $100,000 to fight this back in McIver's era. I don't know if he's here tonight. But so it was money well spent at the time. You may not see the value of it in the day-to-day, but actually in the background, actually there's less noise in Hingham as a result of that investment. No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Paul? I'm all set. Thanks very much for your work tonight.
Okay.
As an amateur pilot, I can tell you they enforced the rules about gradual approaches. There used to be the step-down method, and I didn't like it. Anyway, it's too bumpy, you know. So, but anyway, as Irma and Paul have said, we very much appreciate your involvement in this and you keeping us abreast of what the citizens need to be aware of. So, thank you. We'll invite you back maybe in 6 months.
If you wish, yeah.
Yeah, that would be good.
In fact, that'll happen this year. So.
Okay, yeah. That would be good. Thank you.
And Mr. Vickers also. Yeah. We don't want to lose you.
Okay. Declan, you can stay. Some time ago, back in last year's town meeting, we put together a committee to address the issue of a noise bylaw. By way of background, we had a bylaw, but it was unique to one area, the shipyard. And the sense was from the police department, and the deputy chief is here to hopefully correct me if I'm wrong, was that in order to enforce something, we need to have some consistency across the town. And we put together a group of people, and one of the members was Declan Boland, because of his experience working with Massport on this subject, and others who had expressed interest to deal with an issue that some people found not only interruptive and disruptive to their day-to-day lives, but also what to do about it to make it better than it was. So I welcome the committee for coming in. I thank you for their service. And Declan, if you'd be so kind to introduce them to the public.
Yes, I will. In fact, attending, again, Declan Boland at 338 Main Street and chair of this noise committee. I'm not actually, I suppose, noise is not my thing, but I just happen to be on 2 committees that are related to it.
It says.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's not watching tonight, so I can say anything.
Okay.
So, the first committee meeting we had on this when we kicked it off was October 16th, and at the committee was actually there were 5 committee members at that. We have Dennis King here, actually, who's our legal representative. We've got Joe McCracken, who's in the audience, who's a former policeman here in Hingham. Vicky Donlan, actually, she's at the CPC meeting, can't make it tonight. And then Brian Knees, actually, I'm not sure because he was making it, but he had a business commitment. And then obviously Deputy Olson, who's from the police department, who was our liaison and gave us sageful advice. So with that,
excuse me, can I give that comment to his boss?
Yes.
Sage. Oh my. Okay.
So with that is that I have about 15 minutes here, so I'll just take a couple of minutes in terms of the introduction. I'll pass it to Dennis to talk about the bylaw itself, and then leave time for questions and answers again. Okay. So one of the things I put in the cover memo was just to give you a sense of one of the problems with noise, whether it's at Logan, but particularly local noise, is actually how to measure it. And this is a constant issue in terms of how we do that. The problem with noise is actually it changes. One is actually it's either a device or some sort of motorized machine or something like that moves, so you can't actually take a capture at one particular time. You also have the issue of distance from the object that's creating the noise. Thirdly is that you've got an issue with ambient noise, which means actually if there's a high level of background noise involved, it actually drowns out a certain amount of the noise. So everything's relative. You also got the time of day. There's a difference between night and day. And then finally is actually temperature and humidity actually have a big issue for us. To give an example, if you've got high humidity or you've got rain coming, you can actually hear Logan from Hingham. If you have a dry day, you don't. I don't know if you noticed that, but actually that's something that you do. So with that, we sat down at the first meeting and we went through some general principles. Firstly, we thought, let's keep it as simple as possible. Secondly, we thought, let's review the complaint log that the police have gathered, which we did. And we also looked around to see if there's any other sources of complaints. There's none directly, because largely most of the complaints come through the police department itself. Thirdly, we wanted to build upon on what was already in place in Hingham. Fourthly, we wanted to create a bylaw based on other towns' experiences in terms of looking at best practices, already what's been created. We looked at about 25, 30 towns altogether, particularly the 20 of the comparable towns for Hingham. But we also looked at a couple of Cambridge and Boston, etc., which are typically not a comparable jurisdiction to us. And the two final areas that we looked at, one was to try and make this quantitative as possible, so not to take the qualitative aspect out of all of this, so that it isn't just an opinion that's involved, but actually we can use measurements as a result of this. And then, in one of the big questions we asked Glenn was what is enforceable? What exactly can we actually do? Can we fine people, put people in jail, or whatever it is? But really, joking aside, it's actually that was the problem that the police department have, is not having a bylaw that they can enforce. So with that, Roger Fernandez from the DPW gave us a document which was actually a godsend. It was called Noise Ordinances, essentially a Bible of how to create a bylaw, and that really accelerated our efforts to get through all of this. So of the time frame from October 16th to now that we have created this draft bylaw, which we submitted to you for your consideration. In the noise complaints, there were, of the last 2 years, and this came from the police department, there were 348 calls, and I think it was calendar 2012 and 13 year to date up until November. What we found is that the busiest time for noise complaints was around 9 to 10 p.m. In the evening. 8 to 9 was the next busiest, and the least busiest was in the morning, 8 to 9 a.m. and 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon. The busiest month was July, and then the least busiest was February. So the quietest month in Hingham is in February, just for your information, at 8 a.m. in the morning. So with that, we reviewed the bylaws. Dennis did a great job in terms of doing all of that. Glenn actually guided us through what some of the issues that we experienced, and we do have an issue that's cropped up today that we'll probably be asked a question about, which I think we need to bring into the scope of this. And also, there was a question regarding the methodology of how we measure noise. So we actually had to take all of the documentations we had, which is quite extensive, and come up with a template that actually we presented to and included in this document in terms of looking at why we went about this in this particular way. So we think we came up with a fairly fair bylaw. It was meant to be everything that we set out to do, although it may seem long, but actually the guts of it actually is relatively short in terms of keeping with the intent of being simple. The other thing that we decided to do was actually, we were two suggestions in all of this. One was to keep our committee in place if it's adopted by the town, which of course has to be ratified by the state, I believe. So there's time that will be spent doing that, so that we can actually go back and look at if it's successful, and keep the committee in place through 2014 or whatever it is. And I think generally the committee members all agreed to do that. And then secondly, we need some funding at some stage in order to put up signage. Basically, part of all of this is to say, if you warn people about there's a noise bylaw, you probably have a better chance of enforcing it, for two reasons. One is people will not be so noisy, and then secondly is actually it allows then the police in order to say, did you not see the sign, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have to be detailed, but anyhow, that's the point. So with that, we put together the bylaw, and I'll pass it to Dennis, who's going to take us through it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I want to begin with just some quick preliminary comments, some of which echo what Declan has said, and then I'll take you through the noise ordinance. The first question the committee addressed logically was, should there be a noise bylaw? We all agreed at the outset that we were not looking to regulate simply for the sake of regulation. That question was answered in the affirmative primarily by Deputy Chief Olson, who told us that as things presently stand, the police department enforces or addresses noise complaints primarily under the Mass Criminal Statute dealing with disturbing the peace. Glenn stated that the department would prefer to have another source of authority that it could point to, and in particular to have some sort of an objective provision by which a measurement could be taken when under circumstances that allow that, so that we wouldn't have to be dealing with just the officer's subjective interpretation of whether a noise complaint was justified or not. Assuming a bylaw was a good idea, and we decided that it was, we then looked at a group of approximately 20 towns that Hingham generally looks at as comparables. And we also looked at the white paper that Declan mentioned earlier, authored by a fellow named Dr. Robert Cheneau, who's a sound consultant with a national reputation, who teaches at Purdue and University of Colorado. And what that white paper does is sets out model provisions of a municipal noise ordinance with alternatives and a discussion as to why some alternatives adopted and others aren't. As a general matter, noise bylaws contain two types of provisions, subjective and objective. Subjective provisions generally prevent the creation of noise that has an adverse impact on the quality of life of a person of normal sensitivities, and that's important for obvious reasons. Objective provisions are generally based on decibel levels and prohibit the creation of noise exceeding an agreed upon level during certain hours of the day and night. Ordinarily, noise ordinances contain both types of provisions because there are times, Declan mentioned one of them, moving vehicles where you don't have the opportunity to sit there with a sound meter and take an objective measurement. And so the subjective provisions are always there as a backstop that allow the enforcement officials to enforce the ordinance. The results of our efforts to date is a noise bylaw that consists of slightly more than 6 pages. As Declan pointed out, however, the actual substantive provisions are much shorter and are contained primarily in sections 6 and 7 of the bylaw. Section 1 is simply a short title provision that provides a name for the ordinance. Section 2 contains a statement of the policy that we think would be furthered by adoption of the ordinance. Section 3 contains a series of definitions of terms that are used throughout the ordinance. Section 4 designates the town officials charged with enforcing it. And that provision provides that the chief of police, the executive health officer, and the building inspector and their authorized designees shall be charged with enforcement authority. Section 5 deals with the duties and responsibilities of other town boards, committees, departments relative to the ordinance, and simply provides that such boards and departments shall cooperate with the officials charged with the responsibility of enforcing the ordinance and shall require compliance with the ordinance in connection with whatever permits they issue. As I reread the draft this evening before the meeting, it occurred to me that language should probably be added to the provision requiring other boards and departments to require compliance with the bylaw, to say something like to the extent feasible, because it seems to me that there could be unforeseen situations in a given instance where compliance with the strict terms of the bylaw might not be possible, and we should at least give them that leeway. Section 6 is the primary subjective noise restriction and basically provides that individuals shall not create or cause to be created sound that causes a noise disturbance, which is a defined term that includes a sound or vibration that disturbs or annoys a person of normal sensibilities, causes or tends to cause an adverse effect on the public health and welfare, or endangers or injures persons or real or personal property. Section 7 describes specific activities that are deemed to violate the noise ordinance. Subsection B contains the primary objective provision, which sets forth decibel levels to be not to be exceeded during certain hours of the day. I should point out that those levels are consistent with the levels contained in the zoning bylaw for noise emanating from an industrial zone into a residential district. Having said that, I think the members of the committee strongly feel that before this is presented to a town meeting, that it should be reviewed by a professional noise consultant. We recognize our limitations. None of us are professional sound engineers, and the law of unintended consequences advises us to have someone take a second look at that. So I think that that's very important.
So as a comment on that, I am, based on your advice, I talked to Roger Fernandez of this, of the GPW, and we've been back and forth a couple of times. He's identified a consultant, I think, that actually will do that. We haven't talked to specifics regarding how to fund it. He says it's going to be a nominal or a pro bono piece of advice. But Dennis actually was rightly raised this issue that we wanted an objective opinion about this. All that being said, this is what we saw as being used in a lot of other towns. So that's why we took this and put a stake in the ground that this is what we've seen in other places. And we just wanted that validated.
Good. Good.
Other subsections in Section 7 deal with things like construction activity, loading and unloading activity, use of domestic power tools and the like, use of engine braking devices. With respect to construction activity, our early discussions with Deputy Chief Olson involve the general sense in Hingham that there is a limitation on when construction can begin, and people generally feel that it's 7 a.m., but Deputy Chief Olson informed us that that is nowhere to be found in any written document, or ordinance, or bylaw, so we did include that in one of the subsections of Section 7. Section 8 is also important. That deals with exemptions from the noise ordinance. We were sensitive to the fact that other people in town have addressed similar issues in different contexts. The example that jumps to mind immediately is the new high school fields and the public address system there. We knew that there had been a process of community engagement that took place and extensive study. We were very sensitive to not wanting to interfere with that process and step on anyone else's toes. So Section 8 exempts from the noise ordinance things like emergency vehicles, emergency work, activities that are either permitted by other town officials or sanctioned by other town departments, for example, the school department and the like. Dr. Gallo was in one of our meetings, and we talked about noise generated by school buses pulling in and out and the like, and recognized that we didn't want to put in place an ordinance that would render that activity violative. Section Section 9 just provides for a right of appeal to the Superior Court and establishes a very limited scope of review, that being simply a determination of whether the decision by the town official is supported by substantial evidence. And finally, Section 10 is simply a severability clause that says that if one or more provisions of the ordinance are determined to be illegal, the balance of the ordinance nonetheless remains in effect. One comment I do want to make about an omission in this draft, and I know I drafted the provision, and I suspect that I drafted it as an insert to be put in that never made it, but that related to fines, enforcement, what are the consequences of a violation? And the committee had discussed a graduated schedule of fines beginning, I think, at
it was 100.
At 100 and going ultimately up to 300, I think.
First offense is 100, second offense 200, third offense and more is 300. And then also there was an issue that the police department could track it in terms of repeat offenders. So unless you can do that, which you can, is actually that allows us to track that way.
So that's the draft that currently has been circulated. We are pleased with our progress to date, subject to review by all the people who need to review it, including town council, I think, ultimately, and as I said, a noise consultant. So we're here to answer any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Dennis and Declan. That was very thorough. And I would suggest, Betty, that we put this up on the website so that people can look at it. And I recognize, if I heard you correctly, that you have Section 5 needs to be modified. You want to add to Section 4 some fines issues.
Yes.
So I think it would be appropriate for us to not vote on this tonight until such time as you make those modifications.
Okay.
And then therefore, since it will be up on the website, that'll be an opportunity for the public to comment. We close the warrant,
January 21st this year because the 20th is a holiday.
Okay. We the next meet on the 23rd, so I would think we'll hold it till then, if I could make that suggestion, since we don't meet on Tuesdays. If that's okay. Deputy Chief Olson, do you have any additional comments you'd like to make on behalf of the police? If I could put you on the spot, since I want you to know I made the mistake today when I went to the police chief on another matter. I walked in with a Hingham Fire Department hat. I am lucky that my head is still where it is when I walked in.
I have to apologize. I quickly ripped it off his head without thinking that he was my boss. But
that's all right.
He took it gratefully.
Well, if you all gave us police department hats, I am sure.
Yes. I said the same. I said
my
the
better
same. I
half
told you.
hasn't taken his off.
You want to make a motion?
Some specially made right now.
However, okay. Make sure mine's a smaller one.
I'd just like to say on behalf of the police department, I think this is a process we've been asking for many years, just to make this concrete so that we did have some enforcement options. And just to mention, we did talk about the fine system, but the officers would also have the opportunity to go out and do verbal warnings as well. But this gives us the authority to say, like, here's the bylaw, this is what you're in violation of, cease and desist, or you could be subject to a fine. So the verbal option remains there as well. It's not always a first-time $100 offense. But I'd like to thank the committee, because I know it's been a tough time to do this and a lot of time, and I'm sort of glad that we finally got to this point. Thank you.
That's great. Okay, Paul, since I may.
I would like to apply a fact pattern and ask you to plug it into the statute, if you would. I'm next door. Somebody shows up. They've got 4 backpack leaf blowers going full blast for an hour. I call the police department. They come out. What happens? Are they exempt under this? Do they measure the decibel with some kind of monitor? And if between the hours of 7 a.m. and 8 o'clock at night it exceeds 55 decibels within 100 feet of the locus, they're in violation of the statute?
Well, a couple of things. The objective provision always applies. So if, under your scenario, if a complaint was made, someone could come out with a sound meter And the way the objective provision is written, if the decibel level is exceeded for more than 15 minutes in any hour, that would be a violation.
Does the officer stay there, though, for 15 minutes?
Well, they would have to if they're going to measure. And again, yeah, I mean, but, and again, that's why the objective provisions are always backstopped with a subjective provision that would allow an officer to say, look, you've created a noise disturbance under the general definition.
Well, if the citizen said, this has been going on for an hour, the officer shows up with the meter, and it's at 80, and the citizen says, this is what it's been like for over an hour, would that satisfy the statute? Does the officer have to stay there in that instance, or can you just act?
Well, I'd leave that one to the enforcement officer, but I mean, I can tell you just from my perspective, the issue is one of evidence. If you have a witness that says the same level has been constant for the past hour, I would think that the officer would have that source of evidence to conclude that the objective provision was violated. However, knowing the diligence with which the Hingham Police Department operates, I'm sure the officer would want to do his own measurement as well.
If I'm hearing you right, if I may, Paul, if I'm hearing you right, based on what Glenn just said, the idea is to minimize the noise, not to collect a fine.
Correct.
So if you can modify the behavior by presence of an officer, maybe the person doesn't realize it's about, or whatever the subjective issue you mentioned earlier, the objective would come into effect, I would expect, when the violation continued.
Exactly. I mean, the committee doesn't view this as punitive. It views it, as you said, as a means to modify behavior. And we had a lot of discussions with Deputy Chief Olson about enforcement, and he was adamant about wanting and needing the flexibility to give warnings and not just be meting out fines in the first instance.
So that would be good, I think, to your point about in the enforcement mechanism to have a statement as to that potential. Okay.
Well, I mean, strictly speaking, in the absence of a statute of this nature, that kind of activity that I described earlier was going on, and a resident called and said, this person's disturbing my peace, that's actionable there. The officer shows up and that's going on. Is that not correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. This just gives you an objective criteria and an additional tool.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I think probably in a situation like you're talking about, the officer would be able to say, listen, guys, you don't need 4 backpack blowers. Why don't you cut it down to 1 and move the other 2 somewhere else? And, you know, I mean, there's different options there that could probably be worked out to remedy the situation. I think that would be the avenue we'd take first. But then we could cite the bylaw and say, this is why you're in violation of it. So if it continues, you've been given due notice, then you'll be subject to the fine.
And it would be a civil infraction rather than action taken under a criminal statute.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Irma?
Declan, have you all assessed the impact on the police department? And I'll ask Deputy Olson that as well. In terms of, are you going to need new equipment? Will everybody have to have a sound meter? You knew I was going to ask that.
No. I think we have one right now that's already been purchased. And I think that would be probably sufficient. They're a cost of around $400. So if we had 1 or 2 of them in the station at all times, I mean, it's not too hard to have an officer come and getting them. And I don't really foresee this as something that, you know, our guys are going to be preoccupied with a lot. I think most of the time, most people are reasonable when you go and you explain to them the rules and you ask them to keep it quiet. They generally will keep it quiet when we ask them, or make some alternative to do it. I mean, if we go to a loud party, we ask the people to stop it, turn down the speakers, readjust them or something, and they generally get the message that they don't want us coming back. Because if we come back, then we escalate a little bit, and they don't want that. So it generally works out, but this just gives us that extra little bite.
One comment is that the building inspector was at one of our meetings and did make the comment that he thinks he may need to get a meter also because it applies in his department. It isn't just the, it's primarily the police department, but it does apply to the building inspector as well.
Did I hear you say under the section of exemptions, the school is exempt? Because I didn't see this.
Activities sanctioned by a town department having regulatory authority, it would be in section, it doesn't say specifically the school department is exempt, it's broader than that.
Because my concern is school athletic activities.
Yep. I think that would be...
You were trying to cover the waterfront, not
Yes.
just the schools.
Correct. That would be under section 8A 6, which exempts any activity sanctioned by a town board, department, or official having regular authority over the activity.
Now, public hearings haven't been held on this, correct?
Correct.
My thoughts before, and I'm sure this is going to get tweaked, and I did notice there were no fines in here. I'm thinking, this is a pretty good document, but nobody's going to get it. How do you enforce it? Yeah, not bad. I think a lot of very good work has gone into this, and we thank you very much. What I'm going to be looking for when you all come back for us to vote on is from, and I made a short list of organizations. I'll give this to whoever is going to, either you or Sharon, for the minutes.
Okay.
The Bear Cove Park Committee, they have races that start at 7 a.m. So before 7 a.m., you're going to have noise. The school committee, obviously. The Rec Commission, they have many, many activities that involve noise. The South Shore Country Club Management Committee, they have kite days, they have concerts. It was just something in the paper. I'm sure some people saw it in Cohasset. There was an outdoor wedding at a restaurant, and there was a noise complaint from people applauding. So perceiving that the country club could have outdoor weddings, certainly not in this weather. Well, maybe, who knows? I'd like them to look at it. Lincoln Maritime, they do regattas. The Yacht Club, they do junior regattas. If anybody's seen 500 kids eating French fries, making noise.
Yeah. I think didn't Dennis say the list could be endless?
Yeah, but I'm hitting the big ones that we know that we see advertised for large gatherings that would generate noise.
Yeah, but I think the bylaw covers them.
Well, I think it covers it in a different way as well. And there's something I think I omitted to mention. Section 8B allows the enforcement officials to issue permits for good cause shown and with appropriate conditions so as to reasonably minimize any adverse impact. They can grant a permit allowing activity that would otherwise violate the noise ordinance. So we had that in mind, that there would be a process by which someone could go to either the building inspector, the health department, or chief of police and say, this is what I want to do.
So all of this has got to be communicated to all of these organizations?
Yes, no question.
Plus more, all of your private schools, and so on and so forth.
Agreed.
But going back to the point is that we were trying to keep it as simple, generic, and enforceable. So if you get into specifics of each of these different areas, then, as you say, Bruce, it actually ends up as being an endless list.
Yeah, that's right. I think, and there's a judgmental factor that comes in. Okay.
So this will be communicated out, and the only other groups I hadn't mentioned were the Hingham Youth Sports and the Sports Partnership, which play very important roles in athletics.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Dennis, when do you think, and Declan, these modifications can come back to us?
I would think by early next week.
Okay. All right.
I think I have, as I said, the insert drafted. It just has disappeared on me.
That's a lot. Okay, are there any comments from the audience? Yes, sir, come to the...
My name's Jack Linsky. I live at 427 Main Street. About 5 years ago, I think it was, I had a policeman down one Saturday in my driveway around 3 o'clock to evaluate the noise of motorcycles, which has failed to be mentioned tonight, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the most terrible noise that you can have to put up with. It appears that motorcycles coming from Congregational Church up Main Street towards Central, as they get to that corner, their testosterone raises up and so doesn't their hand on the throttle, and they come around that corner like the end of the world. It's insulting. It's truly insulting. And I really need to have police activity out on that street, not just for me, but for the people that live on Main Street, to stop this nonsense. It's terrible. It disturbs your life, and it's not fair to those of us that live there. I don't mind traffic. You know, we've lived there all our lives. We lived there 45 years. Traffic I can put up with, but motorcycles are insulting when they make that noise, and something has to be done about it. It's not something that's going to go away unless the people that control this do something about it.
Well, thank you. I think you you echo the sentiments that created this committee. The idea is the police felt that their hands were tied to some extent, and putting some meat on this gives them that the effort to deal with the issue at hand. Not necessarily to arrest somebody initially, but to make them understand that there is a law that governs noise in this town.
Can I comment on that just before you do it? And now Tom here is going to make a comment as well. We looked at this and spent quite a lot of time talking about it. I live in Main Street. I understand the problem very well. In the discussion, we came up with a dilemma in that this is basically, it falls under state jurisdiction, not under a bylaw. So the problem is that, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dennis, is that we can't create a bylaw that actually restricts noise like that. There is a law already in place. The issue is that, as we talked to Deputy Chief, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this as well, is that it's got to do with the enforceability of the existing law. That's the problem. And that's what we're struggling with here. So the advice we got is not to include it in this particular bylaw because it wasn't appropriate.
I would add, I think the issue was less that the field was preempted by state law than it was the enforceability issue. Glenn told us that there is a Massachusetts statute in force that applies to noise emanating from motorcycles. And what we did not want to do was just add yet another provision that wouldn't have any effect on the actual enforcement. We were told that law is on the books that would permit enforcement, and given that fact, as I said before, our view of not regulating for the sake of regulation, since we were being told by the police department that there was a law on the books that governed it, and it's just a question of having the manpower to do adequate enforcement, we didn't think it was appropriate for inclusion.
Did you want to comment?
Quick comment. I've drafted a...
Could you just come to the microphone and tell us who you are for the folks at home? Thank you.
My name is Tom Sobrin. I live over at 7 Evergreen. I've drafted a proposed amendment to Article 42, Section 7 that is based on the EPA label match-up program. This law was enacted in the city of Boston in 2009, and it's effective. It works. The existing laws and statutes and regulations are unenforceable, which is why the police departments are not writing tickets. I would suggest that we allow my proposed amendment to be put on the website so people can comment. I've also set a violation fine of $250. The city of Boston in 2009 issued a very similar regulation, and if the police department would enforce it, it would be effective. There is no state preemption in this area. As a matter of fact, there's implied federal preemption, and the EPA set up a series of regulations to allow the municipalities and cities to regulate noise. So I'd like to propose an amendment to Section 7.
Can you read it? So
Sure. I have copies. I've given to the Noise Committee. I have additional copies for everyone.
For the folks at home, every motorcycle parked on an operating on public roads in the town of Hingham manufactured subsequent to December 31st, 1982 shall satisfy the exhaust system labeling requirements of Chapter 40 CFR paragraphs 205.158, 205.169. Such labeling shall be clearly visible to inspection without the necessity of removing any equipment attached to the motorcycle or requiring the use of inspection mirrors or other optical aids. A violation of this statute is punishable by a fine in the amount of $250. I remember this discussion in the city of Boston when this was, and the identification on the exhaust systems being required to make sure that it was in compliance from a manufacturing point of view. So I'll give this to Betty, and I'll allow you folks to comment on it when you come back to us. That would be...
Yeah, we've only seen it tonight, so we haven't had a chance to talk.
No, I would appreciate that. Okay. Are there any other comments?
Could I just ask a further question?
Come to the microphone.
If I'm hearing correctly, it seems that nothing's going to be done because there's no way to do anything. Am I hearing that correctly?
I'll ask.
Pardon?
The motorcycle.
In fact, taking care of motorcycles that make too much noise as they go down the street. We're not going to enforce any law relative to that, or is there no law? I thought there was a law.
Yes, please, would you?
I think the issue is that some of the laws that are out there are difficult to enforce because of some of the regulations that have been established on how you go about testing them that require decibel readings, levels of RPMs at a certain level, distances. We do try to enforce it as much as we can. We will continue to try to enforce it as much as we can. And we've been making a concerted effort to pick up the effort on doing that. And we will continue to do it. I understand that it's a quality of life issue for people, and I think people that live along main roads definitely hear the motorcycles. I can't say that, one of the factors is that sometimes when the motorcycles go by and they see a police car, they go very quietly. They don't go through red lights when the police cars are generally parked by the red light. So it is an effort that we're going to have to make, and I think, hearing the complaints of the citizens and stuff, I think we need to make a stronger effort at doing that. But we are enforcing it, but I think we could probably try to do better at enforcing it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we will see you probably, I guess we'll add this to the list of the 23rd, if you'd be so kind. And Dennis, the committee, Declan, I thank you for this is not easy stuff, and there's a lot of factors to consider, and I think you did a yeoman's work in trying to make this happen. And that's, when I said yeoman, Keith German, who's our yeoman resident here in the town of Hingham, I think you'd applaud the efforts that they tried to accomplish this evening. So thank you. We'll see you on the 23rd.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
When this goes up on the website, will there be a link for people to give comments back to Declan and the committee?
I'll talk to Betty tomorrow.
Yeah,
okay, fine.
That would be.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Troop 1, for being here this evening. We'll take a minute just while the room clears. If I could ask you to keep your comments. I've only had to use that once, Bob, in 6 years, so come on. Please. Okay, is John Asher here?
John just walked out the door.
Oh, he's had enough. Could you, Deacon, if you'd be so kind, I understand from a phone call I got at 5 to 7 from the chairman of the FOSS committee that, Art, that John Asher's going to join you?
Yes.
Okay. The next issue.
Speak to the secretary.
Okay, the next issue on the agenda is the Foss Naming Committee, and I'd like to welcome Art Smith and John. I heard, John, that you were anointed. So, I don't know. The bishop's mitre doesn't come with this. You just that you get a chance to talk. So, okay. By way of background, this has been a long-standing effort by the town of Hingham to come to a resolution on the best way to memorialize and commemorate the service not only to the town but to his country of Herbert Foss, who was awarded the Medal of Honor for actions taken during the Spanish-American War. How to do that in a town such as ours that values its property and how it uses things very appropriately and with care. I think we've had an issue a few years ago where the town elected to continue to name things for the geography they represent, and that kind of discussion that was long-standing and came to a resolution. This is different. This is honoring someone who did something above and beyond, as the proclamation on the medal says, the call of duty. So with that, I'd like to have turn the table over to Art Smith and John Asher, who are representatives of the Veterans Council and the Foss Naming Committee.
The Naming Committee part, you can do it. Okay. The Foss Committee, well, first of all, the Foss Committee has been meeting in open session since June 1st, 2012. And the Board of Selectmen appointed a committee to recognize the service of Seaman Foss. Early on in this process, we devised some criterion by which, a fitting memorial would be made to his memory. And we said that the site must be a pedestrian destination, that the site must be conducive to constructing a kiosk or a display, perhaps military memorabilia of his, but something educational. The memorial site must be of significant prominence and visibility that all Hingham residents would recognize it and notice its existence. The final recommendation should be a lasting memorial of significant substance as to promote the memory of Seaman Foss and establish him as a community role model. And the committee will consider the impact on all citizens. The committee will do its best to make an independent judgment and will take into consideration the recommendations of other town boards. So, as I said, we had approximately 12 meetings. And finally, at the December 30th meeting, the Foss Committee voted to request that the Selectmen support a warrant article to be put before the annual town meeting of 2014 to name the Hingham Inner Harbor the Herbert L. Foss Waterfront Park. And in addition, to approve a memorial of imposing size and significant scale to be located between Whitney Wharf and Kimball's Wharf. And the Selectmen, you have a copy of the rendering?
Yes, yeah, I've got that. Bob, could you focus on the document? We'll see it up on the screen here shortly.
Okay. Let's see. A rendering of the proposed memorial was presented to the committee so that more complete understanding of the scope and feel of the memorial could be achieved. A motion was made by myself and seconded by Alan Peralt and was approved by a unanimous vote of the committee. Then the committee made a presentation to the Veterans Council on December 30th, and I'll turn it over to John Asher to represent the Veterans Council.
Thank you, Art. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Art said, following the meeting of the FOSS Committee, the Veterans Council convened and discussed the recommended action by the FOSS Naming Committee. The vote of the FOSS Committee was presented to the Veterans Council, and the copy of the rendering was also distributed. After a lot of discussion, the Veterans Council voted to take the following action: to endorse the request to name the Inner Harbor from Otis Street to Steamboat Wharf, the Herbert L. Foss Waterfront Park; to endorse the recommendation of the FOSS Naming Committee to construct a memorial as Art described it; and to assign the responsibility for the design and construction of the memorial to the FOSS Committee, augmented by 2 members, as I'll describe in just a minute. And finally, to complete the construction of the memorial to meet a dedication date of October 12th, 2015, which is the date on which we would celebrate Herbert L. Foss's birthday, as we've done the last 5 or 6 years. In addition, the council voted to establish what we were terming a Hall of Honor in the vestibule of Town Hall to more properly commemorate the memory of Medal of Honor recipients, as well as those of all wars who gave their lives for the cause of freedom. Right now, that recognition is accorded from World War I going forward, but obviously there are veterans who sacrificed prior to that. So this evening, Mr. Chairman, the Veterans Council asks, along with the FOSS Naming Committee, that the Board of Selectmen take the following 2 actions. First, to vote to initiate and sponsor a warrant article to be placed on the annual town meeting warrant of 2014, naming the area known as the Hingham Inner Harbor from Otis Street to Steamboat Wharf, the Herbert L. Foss Waterfront Park. And secondly, to charge the current FOSS Naming Committee, augmented by 2 additional citizens, to oversee the design and construction of a memorial similar in design and scope to the rendering you have before you this evening, of imposing size and scale dedicated to Seaman Foss, located between Whitney Wharf and Kimball's Wharf. And that's what we are asking jointly from the perspective of our 2 committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John, and thank you, Art. And I want to thank the committee and the Veterans Council members who are here. This has been, in my opinion, a long, perhaps too long a process to come to closure on a fitting memorial to someone who has done so much for the country. And I think given all the puts and takes and opinions that have been expressed over the course of at least 2 years, and I understand maybe back as far as 20 on this issue, I'm very proud to have it come to conclusion here tonight. So with that statement, I'll turn it over to my colleague on my left, Mr. Healy, if you have any questions or comments on the article.
Just a comment. I thank you. I thank the Veterans Council. I thank the FOSS Naming Committee for its dedication to this effort, its patience, and its willingness to reach the recommendation that it has. I respect that and very much appreciate that. In 2009, while I served on the planning board, I wrote a letter to the Journal speaking about Seaman Foss, and I felt then, as I do now, the location that you are speaking to tonight is ideal. He's a man of the sea. He earned the Medal of Honor at the Battle of Cienfuegos while at sea, and it's very fitting. To those that would say there are 2 Medal of Honor winners, I'd say that there are other locations for the other Medal of Honor winner. But Seaman Foss certainly deserves the recognition that we're discussing tonight, and I thank all of you sincerely for the work that you've done in this regard.
Thank you. Irma?
I want to thank the Veterans Council and the FOSS Naming Committee for their great patience, their great diligence, in following through on this. It's been, for my part, very frustrating that we couldn't do this quicker and get our act together. I think this is very fitting. I've been showing this rendering around. It's been well received. There have been a couple suggestions which I have passed back to Mr. Claypool. I also want to thank Al Kearney for whipping out this little rendering, that it was very well done, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing this in completion, that we actually get this done. So thank you, gentlemen, very, very much.
Okay. Thank
Get
you.
on with it.
Okay, thank you, Irma. I understand there's a small amount of money that will be required for us to vote. I think it's within the jurisdiction of the town administrator to get the price of this built, so that's understood. It's not in our motion to deal with the hallway coming into Town Hall, but I know it's the intent of the committee to see that that happens, and if you need our vote, come back to us, okay?
Will do. Thank
so
you.
we can do that. That being said, I'll entertain a motion, Mr. Healy.
I'll move to accept the recommendation of the Foss Committee for a waterfront monument honoring Herbert L. Foss to include an article for the 2014 annual town meeting and to form a committee which includes current members of the Herbert L. Foss Memorial Committee, as well as William Reardon as a representative from the Harbor Development and D.J. McKinnon as a citizen at-large representative to oversee the construction.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I have just a question. I found out yesterday about 3 o'clock from the town administrator. I was informed of the 2 new members of the committee, which I think are great. D.J. McKinnon has certainly put up his own money to develop and to sponsor the study for the community boating center, which is in progress, and that's going to be a long journey. I was also happy about the harbor development, and then I was told the representative had been chosen. Perhaps you can tell us how that happened, because everybody on that harbor development committee is marvelous. So I'm curious how the one was selected.
At a meeting that I had with Chairman Jim Claypool of the Foss Naming Committee, we tried to come up with, there were a couple of different options. There's a conservation candidate that could be perhaps because it abuts potential conservation land. And the thought was that one Harbor Development Committee member would be appropriate, and Bill Reardon was selected because he lives in the neighborhood and would give good input into the nature of how this will evolve. And Bill has long served the town in a variety of ways, and this is one where I am most comfortable that he would be there. And to your comments on DJ, that was a given. The first person we told the committee to talk to was DJ because of all the good work that he's done on the harbor for us.
I'm just thrilled he has accepted, because he is always traveling.
Well,
and doing, so this is marvelous to have DJ on it.
This will be great. So that's how it happened. And Art, anything else?
One more comment. We also requested that the waterfront be named the Herbert L. Foss Waterfront Park. I don't know if that was part of your motion.
It is not.
It'll be part of the warrant article.
It'll be part of the warrant article when we hold the hearings on that. So, and whatever else.
I didn't know how
yeah, that's the way it.
The formality of it all.
And Virginia Gray would take you to the woodshed, because Steamboat in her mind is Barnes 2, and I believe the official name is Barnes 2.
So, okay.
Well.
Okay, so.
She took me to the woodshed.
Okay, so we've had the motion. We've all set the vote. We done?
Yep.
We're ready.
Oh, okay, Mr. Healy? Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So be it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome. Donate.
Keith, you brought your whistle. That's good. Okay, we have one other vote. Irma, you're going to the MMA meeting?
Yeah,
and,
I was sacrifice.
Well, good for you. So,
actually, it's very interesting to go to.
Yep, I've been to a number of them. You can vote for us. You wanna, Mr. Healy, if you could...
Yeah, I probably shouldn't do my own.
I'll vote that we designate Ms. Irma Lauder to vote at the MMA Annual Business Meeting on Saturday, January 25th, 2014.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I don't think I had too much competition on that one, did I?
On the...
Short straw.
I think for the budget, it's getting late, and we have an executive session that's following. I think in your folders, you have budgets that we've heard that I know there aren't discussions on, so I thought what I'd do is just go, so there's a formal vote to send them to advisory. And I will go down the list, and if you want to put a hold for further discussion, just raise your hand, okay?
Yeah.
So I'll start, and it's, how many pages? It's not too
many.
long. No, not too long, but it's the easiest way. This way we can get it to advisory so they can to start their work. And I discussed this with the chairman of the advisory committee, and he's in agreement. The Selectmen budget, I put a hold on. I have a suggestion I want to discuss with my colleagues. The reserve fund. Okay to vote? Just say aye. Aye. Town accountant? Aye.
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 Assessors?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Treasurer collector?
Actually, can we go back to assessor?
Sure.
Let's hold on that one, because I still want to talk about the appraisal money.
Okay, and I want to put a hold on that for the salary. Okay? 145, treasurer collector?
Aye.
Aye. Legal services, that's been, we heard, that's been pushed back to the 232 is the number you should have in front of you.
Aye.
Aye.
Town meeting?
Aye.
Aye. Town clerk?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Elections?
Aye.
Aye.
Community planning as a
No.
whole? Bear Cove Park?
Aye.
Town hall?
Aye.
Grand Army Memorial Hall?
Aye.
Okay. Public safety, police department?
Aye.
Aye.
Fire department and dispatch services are a hold. Animal control?
Aye.
Aye.
Harbor master?
Aye.
Public safety utilities?
Aye.
Okay, school department, we haven't had a number from them, so that will be a hold. Town engineering?
Aye.
Highway recreation tree, or was a hold on that. Landfill and recycling?
Aye.
Sewer commission?
Aye.
Okay, there's a hold on the health department. Elder services?
Aye.
Veteran services?
Aye.
Aye.
Health imperatives?
Aye.
South Shore Women's Center?
Aye.
Library?
Aye.
Recreation commission?
Aye.
Aye. Trustees of the bathing beach?
Aye.
Aye.
Celebrations?
Aye.
Country club?
Aye.
Okay. Debt service?
Aye.
Okay. And employee benefits, there's been a hold on those. And unclassified? And property and liability insurance?
Aye.
Aye. Is there any other I missed?
Nope.
No, that's it.
That's good.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you all for that. We'll get back on the others. Ted and I talked last night, and he intends on the 23rd, we'll go over, start the discussion on those we have holds on. So he'll be here to help us. Okay. In the interest of time, I would now recommend that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy with respect to ongoing litigation with 23 Ridgewood Crossing and the Aquarian Water Company, because discussion of these matters in open session may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town. The town will not resume open session this evening.
So moved.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Healy, aye. Mr. Rebuffo, aye. Ms. Lauder, aye.
Can I do a thank you to the girls' hockey team?
Quick.
Quick. Girls' hockey team. Awesome frozen Fenway job.
Yeah.
Tally and I had the best time watching the girls' hockey team play at Fenway. They drew the best slot. They drew the 12-15 slot. It was wicked cold, but the whole time the sun was out and there was no wind. So, girls, you knocked it out of the park. It was really great. And the two ladies in red that I was hanging around with, and you know who you are, Dr. McCann, Dr. Gerard McCann, and Margaret, awesome job.
Great. Good comment. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will see you whenever. Okay.